It was supposed to be the road trip of a lifetime. On July 14, 2015, the Dalton family, Mark, Rachel, and their 12-year-old son, Evan, left their suburban home in Eugene, Oregon, for a 2-week summer adventure through the Pacific Northwest. Their itinerary was packed: national parks, roadside diners, quirky small towns, and long stretches of open road. Rachel, a former geography teacher, had even hand-drawn a map of their route, marking every stop with little notes like "best milkshakes in town," or "don't forget to try the huckleberry pie." That map, charming and precise, was found 9 days later in the middle of the woods. But the Daltons were never seen again. The alarm was first raised by Rachel's sister, Melissa, who had been receiving daily updates through postcards and texts. On July 17th, everything stopped. No check-ins, no phone activity, no social media posts. It was unusual, especially for Rachel, who was borderline obsessive about sharing their adventures. Melissa waited one more day, then she called the police. What followed was one of the most extensive, baffling missing persons investigations in Oregon's history. Authorities began by retracing their route. Security footage confirmed the family stopped at a gas station in Oak Ridge on July 15th, just before noon. The clerk remembered them well. Rachel had asked about the closest scenic picnic spot. He pointed them toward a lesser-known area just off Route 58 near Diamond Lake. They never returned. Search parties scoured the region. Helicopters flew overhead. Dogs combed the woods. Volunteers walked miles of terrain. Nothing. No bodies, no vehicle, no phone signals, no tire tracks, just silence. Until a week later, when a hiker stumbled across something strange in the trees. He had veered off trail, looking for a stream. When he noticed a piece of paper pinned to a tree with a smooth river rock. Curious, he approached. It was a hand-drawn map, sun-bleached, edges curled, with Rachel Dalton's handwriting unmistakably scribbled along the margin. The title, at the top, read, Route Fun Day 4. It showed a path winding through forest roads, with little markers labeled Lookout Point, Tallest Pine, and Hidden Creek. A red star was drawn near the bottom with the words, Lunch here, Picnic Rock. Investigators confirmed it was Rachel's, but what chilled them was the note beneath the star. Faint, but visible under certain light. If anyone finds this, we're in trouble. The investigation immediately shifted to a possible abduction or survival situation, but again there were no signs of a struggle. No distress calls, no disturbed terrain near the picnic area. Their SUV, a silver Subaru Outback, was still missing. The only proof they had that the family had ever been in that forest was that map. The press ran with the story. Family of 3 vanishes in Oregon woods. The Dalton disappearance. The road trip that never ended. Theories flooded the internet, ranging from serial killers to cults, to off-grid survivalists, or even government conspiracies. But there was one detail that stuck with Melissa. The map. Rachel had never used GPS. She believed in tactile navigation. Even when traveling, she made hand-drawn maps for every route, and she had a habit of including tiny clues, puzzles, or inside jokes. Melissa knew that if her sister left behind that map, it meant more than the authorities realized. Rachel was trying to say something. So Melissa made it her mission to find out what. She requested a higher resolution copy from investigators and began analyzing it. She looked at every marker, every margin, every scribbled arrow, and after 2 days of comparing it to known trail maps, she found something no one had noticed. The river on Rachel's map didn't align with real rivers in the area. Neither did the Tallest Pine or Hidden Creek. In fact, none of the labels matched any known features, but the proportions were accurate. The shapes, the curves. She realized Rachel had mirrored the geography. The map wasn't drawn from the road looking in. It was drawn from the forest, looking out. Melissa brought the new insight to detectives. With the help of a cartographer, they flipped the map digitally and overlaid it on topographic data of the region. Suddenly, everything clicked. Rachel had drawn the map backwards deliberately. The red star. It pointed to a narrow basin, 2 miles off the main trail. A basin not listed on any hiking brochures. One accessible only by foot, or if you knew an old logging road that had been closed since the 90s. A new search was launched, and what they found in that basin would finally begin to unravel the mystery that had haunted the Dalton family and the entire country for years. The basin marked on Rachel's map was exactly where Melissa and the digital overlays had predicted, tucked into a curve of dense forest just beneath a natural ridge, invisible from the main trail and even aerial drone passes. When search teams finally reached it on foot, they found what no one had expected, a campsite, but not the Dalton family's. This one was old, overgrown, half swallowed by moss and time. Torn canvas tents, rusted utensils, a collapsed wooden lean-to. Everything looked untouched for at least 10, maybe 15 years. And then they found a fire pit cold, buried under leaves and a scorched metal pot with initials carved into the handle LM. It didn't match any member of the Dalton family, and just a few feet away, buried shallow beneath loose rocks, they found a license plate. The numbers matched a 1989 Dodge Caravan reported missing in 2004. The driver had been a man named Louis Mendel, a reclusive former Forest Service worker who had vanished while camping in the same general region. At the time, his disappearance hadn't raised alarms. He had no family, no close friends. It was assumed he wandered too far into the woods and had an accident. But now, investigators began to suspect something else. The Mendel case wasn't the only missing person report tied to this stretch of forest. A retired ranger named Hank Stills, who worked the area in the late 90s, reached out after hearing the news on the radio. He remembered Mendel, said he was off, even back then. Always alone, always building something. He spoke in vague riddles about places to disappear and hiding in plain sight. Stills also remembered issuing a warning once after finding a series of makeshift snares on public land that violated park safety codes. I told him someone could get hurt, Stills said, and he just smiled and said, "That's the point." Suddenly, the basin didn't feel like a random location anymore. It felt chosen, as if someone had once built it to trap or hide. But why had Rachel marked it? And what had happened there? The forensic team started sifting through the site carefully. Layers of earth were peeled back, scanned, cataloged, and then, buried beneath a collapsed tent pole, they found something that changed everything. A journal, waterlogged, warped, but intact enough to read. The handwriting didn't match Rachel's. It belonged to Mark Dalton. The entries were dated July 15th through July 17th, 2015. Mark had written, in short, frantic sentences. Some were crossed out, others trailed off. Took wrong road. Turned off by creek logging road, wasn't marked. Rachel thinks someone's following us. Saw movement last night. Eyes in the trees. Engine's dead, Rachel says. Don't panic. She marked the map, just in case. We tried to leave basin, got lost again. We hear something every night now. The last entry was dated July 17th, the same day Melissa stopped receiving messages from her sister. Rachel left map by Lookout Rock. Says someone will find it. I pray she's right. Investigators were stunned. This meant the Daltons had been alive in that basin at least 3 days before they vanished completely. They had tried to escape, tried to leave a breadcrumb trail, and somehow Rachel had the presence of mind to pin the map to that tree, hoping someone, anyone, would find it. But that wasn't all. The journal had one more entry. It wasn't signed by Mark. It was a different handwriting. Entirely. Angular. Sharp. Almost ... meticulous. They should not have come here, but now they are part of it. Chills rippled through the investigation team. Who wrote that final line? Mendel. Someone else. The FBI was called in. They expanded the search zone to include the entire basin and surrounding ridge lines. Over the next 3 days, they discovered 3 more hidden sites. A buried crate containing rusted knives, a compass, and hand-drawn maps dating back to the 1990s. A hollowed-out tree stump filled with bone tinamo, mostly, but one jawbone was human, and a sealed PVC pipe with photographs. Blurry, low-resolution shots of hikers, taken from the woods always at a distance, always unnoticed. One of the photos, dated July 15, 2015, showed Rachel and Evan Dalton standing near their SUV. The image had been taken from above, possibly from the tree line. Whoever had taken that photo had been watching them long before they realized they were in trouble. Back at headquarters, Melissa was given the news. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just whispered, "I knew she left that map for me." A full profile was constructed on Louis Mendel. But here's where things got even stranger. The bones found in the basin. None of them matched Mendel's DNA. His Dodge Caravan plate was there. His initials were on the tools. But Mendel himself, he was never found. One agent suggested a chilling theory. What if he wasn't alone? What if Mendel recruited others over the years, created some kind of self-sustaining trap, a hunter's maze, buried beneath the forest? It wasn't just possible. It was starting to feel probable. But even as they tried to process that terrifying possibility, a fresh clue surfaced. 2 miles south of the basin, along a creek bend, a new map was found wrapped in waterproof cloth and tied to a tree branch with red twine. It had the same handwriting as Rachel's, same drawing style, same careful notations. But this one was labeled, "If you find this one, too, we're still alive." The second map was a miracle. Found 2 miles from the basin and protected from rain and animals, it bore the same meticulous handwriting Rachel had used on the first. But this one was different. It didn't just mark picnic spots or forest lookouts. It wasn't cheerful or playful. This map was urgent. A narrow winding path cut through the trees, zigzagging toward a bold red X. Near it, scribbled in shaky letters, was one simple note: "Southeast slope, under rockfall, enter before dusk." Authorities immediately followed the route. They dispatched a tactical unit, drone surveillance, and search dogs. Every move was recorded, every detail documented. They didn't know what they were heading toward, but they knew it had to matter. The trail from the second map led to a narrow gully, choked with debris, fallen trees, boulders, broken roots. A recent landslide had sealed part of it off, but just under the dirt and moss, hidden beneath 2 large flat rocks, the search team uncovered something shocking: a steel-reinforced door, bolted shut, half buried. A vent pipe jutted from the earth nearby, disguised with leaves. Someone had built a bunker, and not just any bunker. This one had a biometric scanner, and according to local contractors interviewed days later, it wasn't constructed by survivalists or fringe preppers. It was built in 2002, funded by government money. The FBI called in a specialized team from Portland to crack the entry system. After 6 hours, the door hissed open. What they found inside was beyond anything they'd imagined. The bunker was clean, dry, self-sustained. 4 rooms, solar power backup, shelves of canned goods, air filtration, medical supplies, and bunk beds. 3 of them looked recently slept in. On the far wall, scrawled in red marker, "We're not alone down here." And in the corner, half hidden under a canvas tarp, was the final, undeniable piece of evidence: Rachel's backpack. Inside were her glasses, her favorite pen, and a notebook with several pages missing. The remaining entries were short, desperate, yet somehow hopeful. "We found this place by accident. The trap didn't kill us, but we're trapped anyway. We've rationed supplies for 12 days. Evan is scared, but brave. Mark wants to go back out. We heard something last night. Not animals. If anyone finds this, follow the red thread. Red thread." The search team found it minutes later, tied to a nail near the ventilation shaft. Thin crimson nylon line, running through the bunker wall and into the darkness of a tunnel. It wasn't part of the official bunker layout. This tunnel wasn't on any blueprint. The FBI hesitated. Was it a trap? A trick? But they had come this far and time was running out. The thread led to a crawl space that narrowed into a descending tunnel. It smelled damp, metallic. The air was cold. 2 agents crawled inside, cameras on, lights flashing, and 20 minutes later, their voices crackled through radios. We found it. A second chamber, makeshift, dug into the rock, barely tall, enough to stand, and inside were 3 figures. A woman, a man, a boy, alive. Rachel, Mark, Evan, emaciated, weak, but alive. They had been underground for 12 days, trapped after fleeing the basin. The tunnel, they explained, had been discovered by accident when Evan kicked a loose panel in the bunker's wall. Rachel said the first bunker was safe, but not for long. They had heard voices above ground, scratching sounds, the distinct impression that someone was trying to get in. They didn't think it was animals, so they followed the red thread into the dark, hoping someone would find it and them. Rachel, through tears, said, "We left the map because we knew no one would believe the rest." The Daltons were airlifted to a hospital in Bend, Oregon, malnourished, exhausted, but miraculously unharmed. Their story dominated headlines for weeks, but the mystery wasn't over, because that bunker, it wasn't on any official record. Documents revealed it was originally commissioned under a national emergency shelter program, then scrapped and never completed. The logs were stamped inactive. So why had it been fully built? Who funded it? And more importantly, who else knew it was there? The FBI returned to the site with full forensic teams, but when they got back less than 36 hours later, they found the hatch destroyed, melted wiring, shattered vent pipe, signs of fire. Whoever had built that place didn't want it found. Agents interviewed the Daltons under close security. Rachel said she believed someone had been following them for days before they reached the basin. She remembered seeing the same white truck parked at 2 different rest stops hours apart. Evan described hearing a voice in the trees, low and whispering. Mark recalled seeing a man standing on a rock ridge motionless, just before their car battery died. He didn't mention it at first because he thought it was a hallucination. Now, he's sure it wasn't. Still, law enforcement couldn't name a suspect. No arrests were made. But locals say strange things continue to happen in that part of the forest. Lights at night, animal carcasses hung in trees, voices, and every year, someone leaves a map at the base of the same trail the Daltons took. Each one is slightly different, but every map ends with the same 3 words: don't look back. 2 months after the Dalton family was rescued, the media frenzy began to quiet. Mark and Rachel declined interviews. Evan returned to school with the help of a trauma specialist. The family focused on healing. But behind the scenes, a new development was brewing. One that would reopen the investigation and reveal a piece of the story no one had seen coming. It started with a drawing. Evan had always loved to sketch. Dinosaurs, animals, race cars, typical for a 12-year-old. But after the rescue, his drawings changed. Rachel noticed him spending long stretches at his desk, unusually quiet, eyes locked on his pencil as he filled page after page. When she flipped through his sketchpad one evening, her breath caught. He had drawn the bunker, from memory, in remarkable detail. The walls, the beds, the symbols carved into the door they never told him about, and on the last page an image that made her hands tremble. A figure, tall, thin, with an unnaturally long face and hollow eyes, standing inside the forest, just beyond the tree line, and below it, scrawled in a child's handwriting, "He was always watching." Rachel brought the sketch to their FBI liaison immediately. At first, they assumed it was imagination, trauma, playing tricks. But when Evan was asked to describe what he drew, his words were eerily precise. He didn't blink, he didn't move, just stood there, even when Dad yelled. He was too tall, his arms were too long, he was waiting for something. Investigators pulled all prior Dalton interviews. No mention of this figure, nothing about long arms, no influence from news reports. And yet, Rachel and Mark confirmed they too had seen a similar figure from a distance, but convinced themselves it was a man, maybe a poacher, a hiker. They had never spoken to Evan about it. Until now, the FBI brought in a forensic sketch artist. With Evan's help, a more detailed version of the figure was created. When shown to veteran field agents, several grew visibly uncomfortable. One agent muttered, "We've seen this before." The figure matched descriptions from multiple missing persons reports spanning 3 decades in the region, people who vanished near forest edges, trails, backroads. In every case, witnesses reported a silent figure in the woods, unmoving, always watching. Soon, a pattern emerged. From 1991 to 2019, at least 14 disappearances occurred within 30 miles of the Dalton rescue site. Most were hikers, solo campers. One was a U.S. Forest Service intern. None were ever found, but 3 had left behind notes, scribbled warnings. One read, "It doesn't follow you, it waits for you." Another had simply drawn an X with eyes. All notes were previously dismissed as the ramblings of scared people lost in the woods. Now, authorities weren't so sure. The FBI opened a parallel case, one not tied to any specific crime, but to what agents dubbed Pattern Echo. They began interviewing other survivors, people who had gotten lost in the forest but made it back. 2 reported seeing something tall and pale. One said she felt like she was being watched from inside her own head. Another claimed she could hear whispering through the leaves, even with her earbuds in. Still no evidence. Still no arrests. But something had changed. And then, Rachel received a final postcard, postmarked from a nearby town. No return address. It was blank except for a hand-drawn map, just like hers. Same ink, same shape, same labeling style. But this map didn't end with a red star or a picnic site. It ended with a spiral, and underneath, in thin black ink, we weren't the only ones who left. Authorities went back to the basin, this time with stronger tech, deeper scans, and a psychological profiler in tow. They uncovered a second tunnel far deeper than the first. Inside, burned-out lanterns, discarded bedding, bones both animal and human. And on the wall, scrawled in what appeared to be charcoal and blood, "The forest doesn't let go. It only waits to be followed." The tunnel terminated at a cave exit that opened onto a cliffside clearing, one that had perfect visibility to the hiking trail below, a perfect vantage point for watching. Evan's sketch of the long-armed figure was shared with wilderness safety networks. Several backcountry hikers came forward. One man said he saw something identical during a trip to Idaho in 2017. Another described it from California's Lost Coast. None had reported it before. All said the same thing: "I didn't think anyone would believe me." To this day, no one knows who or what watched the Daltons in the woods. No proof of a person, no security footage, no conclusive forensic evidence, only drawings, warnings, and a rising number of people reporting the same figure in different places. But one thing remains indisputable: Rachel's map saved their lives. Her decision to leave breadcrumbs lead investigators to a government bunker, exposed forgotten crimes, and possibly unveiled a pattern buried in silence for decades. And Evan, he doesn't draw anymore. He stopped one day, after finishing a final sketch. It was a simple trail map, hand-drawn, with one note in the corner: "If you follow this path, don't follow the shadows.